In this video, we will be building a cool LED sign using these little kits from IC Station. You'll find links in the description below. This is what it looks like, the finished one. So I built one already, and now I'm going to build another one, and you can follow along. It's a pretty easy kit to build, so let's get started. You can find step-by-step instructions on IC Station's website. I will also include a copy of these at the end of this video. Note there are a couple errors in the instructions. They've mislabeled a couple of the parts, so I will add a corrected version at the end of the video. I'll also include the schematic for this kit. There's also one error on the schematic that I'll point out and post that at the end of the video as well. So the kit comes in this little box. You can assemble the LED sign. I've built a couple of these already just for practice, as well as the completed sign that you saw at the beginning of this video. So they come in this little box. You can mount them in the little box, but I chose to mount them on a plexiglass sheet, and I'll show you that as we get towards the end. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. Let me dump out and we'll sort all these parts and start building the kit. I'll give them credit for giving you lots and lots of LEDs in this kit, way more than you need. As you see, I've built several of these now, and I have lots and lots of these multicolor LEDs left over. These are actually pretty nice LEDs because they change between red and green. So we'll start with this board. First step of the instructions is to install the resistors. Generally like to start with the smallest parts first. And I like to measure to make sure to check all of the parts and make sure they're good before I mount them. Let me turn on my soldering iron, get my voltmeter going here, and let's just make sure these should be the 100K resistors. Yep. And yep. And yep. So we'll start with these guys. If you have a component lead bender, that makes this a little bit easier, but I just use needle nose pliers. So we'll start with the 100Ks. All of the parts are nicely labeled on the PC board, so that makes it pretty easy to do this. If you have one of these little arm holders, it makes it a lot easier to do the soldering. So that's the 100K resistors. Next up, we have these 100 ohm resistors. Again, I will check their values. Yep. We have a 1 megohm resistor. Now the last resistor they include in the kit is a 500 and, let me just double check here, 560 ohm resistor. But when I built the first one, I felt like the LEDs were a little bit too dim. These 100 ohm resistors that I installed are part of the current limiting for the LED array. And so I wound up just making the red side and the green side the same values. So I am going to put two 100 ohm resistors. These are actually installed in parallel, I guess just to help with the current limiting a bit. So I'm just going to install them side by side in the hole that's labeled 560. You know, you might want to just check it and see what you think of the brightness, and that's the way you would change the brightness. These control the brightness on the red side, and the 200 ohms that I just installed, these two are in parallel also. They control the brightness on the green side. So fortunately, the leads are pretty thin, so I can actually put both of these side by side through the same hole. Okay, that's the resistors. So next up, we want to install this little ceramic disc capacitor. And this guy goes right here. This is C4. This one in the instructions, they actually call it C1. But on the board, it's labeled C4. So again, I'll note at the end of the video, I'll post my version of the corrected instructions for this thing. Okay, then we want to install the IC. Now, the first board I built, I did solder in the IC, and then the board didn't work quite right, and I wasn't sure if it was an IC problem or not. It turned out not to be. It turned out to be my error on the first one I built. But because of that, I've decided to use sockets for the IC, just in case. It's a pretty common, easy to get IC. It's a CD 4011, and I ordered a few off of Amazon just to have some spares, since I thought I would be building several of these, which I have been doing. And so we'll put that in there. And then the way I like to do these is I'm just going to tack down one pin, and then after I tack down the one pin, I can turn this over, make sure it's flush against the board on the other side, and then tack that joint again. Then I can solder the rest of the pins. Okay. And of course, you'll note that there's an orientation mark on the board where the first pin would line up. Okay, so then we want to install the transistors. There are 4 of them, and those I am also going to test just to make sure they're good. I haven't found any bad ones yet, but it's such a pain to unsolder these things if they're not working. So let's just pop you in our little tester here, and let's see what we get. He looks good. I'll do. So all the transistors test good, so let's go ahead and get those soldered into the board here. All right, and next up are the 3 electrolytic capacitors. They're all the same value. They're all 47 microfarads, and we're going to test those as well. All right, so let's go ahead and mount these guys. Note that they are polarized. They're electrolytic capacitors. The negative side is the stripe on the side of the capacitor, and it goes to the shaded part of the silkscreen on the PC board. So we'll just pop these guys in here. Minus goes this way on this one. Now it's time to install the switches. Now notice that the switches actually go on the other side of the board. And so we have these 2 on-off switches. These are what controls if you have the red side on, or the green side on, or both. Or both off. And again, these guys will just tack one side, 1 pin on each switch, and then we can turn the board over and make sure that they are flush because they go a little bit crooked. So I'm just pushing against the switch while I heat up the solder pad here to make sure that it's laying properly. Then we have the on-off switch, the master on-off switch, and this one is have a direction marked on it. So there's a little indent, a little square at the bottom here, and that lines up with the little cutout at the top of the switch. So he's got to go in that way. And again, we'll make sure he is flush to the board, which he is not. But he is now. And then we can solder him in all the way. Now they do give you a 9-volt battery socket. I chose not to use those since I'm going to have several of these wired together. They also give you a DC power jack, and that we are going to install. That goes back on the top side of the board again. And we'll solder just one of its pins to make sure it's lined up right. That looks good. Now it's time to build up the letter or number board. What I did, so this is a friend of mine's Callsign, ham radio Callsign, NZ6Q. And so what I did is just with, I think I did this in PowerPoint, just kind of took an image of the board with all the holes and then mapped out where I would put the LEDs. You'll notice I tried the N 2 different ways, kind of a wide fat N and a more normal looking N. So I'm going to do it this way. I've already built up the 6, there's the 6, and the Q, there's the Q. So you can see how those come out. These LEDs have 3 leads because they're 2-color. There is an orientation to the board. There's a little arrow that points up. The short lead goes in the square hole. And when you do a bunch of these, you do kind of want to pay attention to that. There were a couple that I wired backwards, and when you turn it on, you'll know right away because the colors will be switched. And so I'm going to go ahead and build up the N and just load up these LEDs in the pattern for the N. And that's what we'll do. So these guys I just pull through, bend these leads out a little bit, and you can do several at a time. That's what I'll do. And then we'll just speed this part up so you get the idea. The letter N is completed. Now we need to install the junction pins socket that go between the two boards. So let's go back to our main board and we will put those on. Same as before, we're just going to solder one pin on each of these so we can make sure they're lined up before we solder the rest of them. You can see they don't they don't come out straight when you first do that. So let's clean that up. That looks good. All right, and we can solder those down. And we also need to install our integrated circuit into the socket. Again, note the alignment notches so that it goes in the correct way. All right. So that board is now complete. Now let's put the matching pins on this board. All right, time to test it out. All right, let's plug these together and test it out. I have my power supply here set to 9 volts and rigged up a connector, suitable connector here. And let's plug it in and see what happens. Power it on. Make sure the colors are changing. We can set those individually as well. And it looks like it's working. So now I'm going to build up this next one. We'll do that off camera. And when we come back, we'll be ready to mount these onto a suitable plexiglass panel and finish this up. Alright, so all the boards are built and the letters are built in Z6Q. Now, to prepare for the case, the first thing I'm going to do is tap the 4 corner holes here. I've got an M3 tap and some M3 screws and spacers, which is what we will use to mount them onto the case, and you'll see how that works. So the first step here is to tap this, and the good news is that it's the hole that they have on here is pretty much the perfect size for me to tap this. So let me put it in my holder. Let me tighten that up a little bit so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay. And then we're just very slowly, carefully going to tap this. You can feel it once it's through. Which it now is. So then just to check it, let's back it out. And we'll try screwing one of these in there. Perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to repeat that now for all 4 of these. I am also going to clean up some of the flux that's on these front connectors, because you'll see these through the plexiglass. You know, the backside you won't see, but it should be nice and clean here on the front. So I'm just going to use some isopropyl alcohol, cotton swab, and I will clean off the front of this these solder joints with some alcohol. And we just kind of dab that on there, let it sit for a little bit, kind of work it in, top and bottom. And that'll clean the flux off of these. Alright, makes it look much better. So I'll do that to the other ones, and we'll have these all cleaned up. We'll be ready to mount them in the case. This is the case. This is actually sold as an acrylic shelf unit, but it's kind of the perfect size for these letters. So the idea is, this is the base, this will be the base, this is the front, that's the top. So there's no enclosed back, but it seemed like kind of the best thing I could find. And then what I will do now, I'll mark off the mounting position for the letters, and then drill through the front here and mount these on. So let's do that next. The first thing I want to do is protect the front of this, and this will also make it easier to mark my hole locations without scratching up the plastic. So I'm just going to make myself a straight line across here, and we'll tape this down. Painter's tape should be relatively easy to take off later. I have a blank of the LED letter number board here that I'll use to mark the positions. And there's a center, there's actually a little dimple right here in the middle. So we have a nice center point. Let's mark that. I have a pen here. So this is our center line right there, like that. And so we can use this as our guide and just kind of space these out evenly. So I'll make a mark. Where's my pencil? Here we go. And then I can mark the holes like so. So let me do that for the other three, and we'll come back and be ready to drill. I've marked each of the hole locations for each of the letter boards, evenly spaced. Again, we have a nice center line here we can use. On the sign that I showed at the beginning, there were 5, and so the middle of that board would be right there. Also mark the tops. It's easy to get confused here. So now I'm going to just make a punch mark so that I can drill on each of these corners at the correct location. Just like that. Because we're drilling into plexiglass, we want to start small and drill slow. So you really want to have a variable speed drill here. And then since we punched our locations, we just have to drill through. One of the tricks with plexiglass is not to melt it. Now, once you have the pilot holes drilled, we just go up a couple of drill bit sizes and drill again. The final size that I used for the M3 screws was 5/32, so I started off with a 1/16 inch bit. Now I'm at the 1/8 inch bit, and then we're going to go up to the 5/32 inch bit. We're making lots of plastic shavings. Now, the last size is going to be 5/32. All right, all drilled. Now peel off the tape. To reveal our nice clean holes. And then we can mount the letters. So we're going to start actually at the bottom. It's a little easier to start at the bottom. Turn it around this way. Clean all the little plastic bits off. And remember which end is up. So this is the bottom, this is the top. There's arrows on these letters so you know which way they go. So we want to point him this way. So we'll take 4 screws, put them through. Four spacers. them over. And then it's just a matter of holding it into position and hope that the screws don't fall out while you do this. Get my screwdriver. So now we'll do the same for the rest of these. All right, we are in the home stretch here. So they're all mounted. Came out pretty nice. And now we just need to interconnect these so that we have power. We'll use this side as the inlet with a 9-volt DC adapter, and then we'll just jumper across the power terminals on each of these. So let me get some wires ready here, and we will do that. I have prepared some short lengths of wire that I can use to interconnect the power between each of these boards. This is the last one. All right, so let's plug these on. So this is the 9-volt inlet here. The terminal on the right is positive, the terminal on the left is negative. So I'm just going to jumper all these positives together and all these negatives together so that we can daisy chain our power. I have interconnected each of the boards so that everybody here gets their 9-volt power. And perfect timing, because today from Amazon came the 9-volt adapter. This is a 2-amp 9-volt adapter. The maximum current draw for each of these boards is about 80 milliamps, so plenty of capacity with a 2-amp adapter. And again, I'll put all the parts description in the description of this video. So let's plug this in and make sure it's working. All right, there we go. Let's turn off some lights here so we can get the full effect. And as you can see, you can individually turn on and off the red or the green, or you can have them both on. But that's pretty cool. I'm very happy with that. Lights back on. So really, all that would be left to do here is maybe put some no-slip feet on the bottom, but this makes the perfect stand. Not going to go anywhere. Yeah, I'm very happy with this. So I hope you found this video interesting, and I'm sure there are lots of different uses for these letters besides just ham radio call signs. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.